Hello, this is Jessie from Jessie at Home, and this Stitchopedia entry is about getting started with crochet. So we're going to learn about holding your hook, holding your yarn, making a slip knot, and making a chain stitch. In all my Stitchopedia entries, I do my best to tell you what kind of yarn I'm using. Otherwise, I end up with a lot of questions in the comments. So this is Red Heart with Love. I like to use a nice worsted weight yarn when somebody is just learning how to crochet. I recommend a worsted weight yarn. Something thinner than that isn't really big enough to get to, it's a little too small to work with and becomes a little difficult, and something thicker than that just becomes a little too cumbersome. So I always recommend a worsted weight yarn when you're first learning to crochet. Red Heart with Love is a worsted weight yarn. That is what this is. It just happens to be a different color that shows up nicely on my screen. Alright, and I am using this crochet hook. It happens to be bamboo, and it is a 6mm crochet hook, which in US terms is also called a J. I like to use a 6mm because it doesn't make my stitches too tight. So when you're first learning, a 6mm crochet hook with a worsted weight yarn tends to work really nicely. It's what I recommend. Again, there's a lot of people who have different opinions, and that's fine. This is just what I recommend. There are various ways to hold your hook. There is something called the pencil hold, where you hold your hook this way, just like if you were writing, okay? And then there is the knife hold, where you hold your hook this way, kind of like when you're cutting. So I happen to hold my hook with the knife hold. You decide what works best for you. My great-grandmother taught me to crochet when I was 8, and this is the way she held her hook. And so this is what I learned, and this is what I became comfortable with. There are various ways to hold your yarn to get tension. All right, we will go over that in a minute when we get to the point where we're ready to kind of hold on to our yarn that way. I'll show you the way again that my great-grandmother taught me. But you may find a way that works better for you. Some people hold on to everything a little tighter, and so they don't need to wrap around their hands as much. There are fancy rings made to hold tension that you wear the ring and you thread the yarn through it. There's all sorts of tricks, but I'm just going to show you what works well for me, and then you can go on from there. So to begin, I do want to tell you front and back. I know you say, I know what front and back means. But in crochet terms, I just want to be sure, because sometimes it's a question I get a lot on my various, Facebook group and page and my blog and stuff. What does it mean when it says front? Does it, especially because if you're working back and forth in rows, one row, the right side, the wearer side of the garment that you're making might be facing you, and then the next row, that wearer side is facing away from you. And people ask, did the front and the back change? When you're working in crochet and something refers to the front loop, or it refers to the front loop or front of your work, most of the time it's referring to not the front and back, not the wearer side and the inside and the outside of the garment, but the front and back in terms of where your hook is and what you're looking at. The part of your work you're looking at that's between your hook and you is the front. And when something says the front of your hook, that's the part between your hook and you. The part that's on the that's behind your hook, that's past your hook from you, that's the back of your work and the back of your hook. Okay? So as long as you understand that, you should be good. Now let's talk about making a slip knot. There are various ways to make a slip knot, but I like to make my slip knot when I'm crocheting a lot like how I make my chain stitches when I'm crocheting. So this is the cut end of my yarn. This end of my yarn is still attached to the ball or the skein or the whatever you want to call it. I'm just, for continuity purposes, we're going to call it the ball of yarn that's at the other outside of my screen here. This end of the yarn is still attached to the ball, this end, okay? And here is my cut end. I'm going to take my crochet hook and I'm going to take my yarn from behind my hook. I'm going to wrap it around over top of my hook, and I'm going to wrap it back again behind my hook again. Okay, so I've made a little crisscross here. Let me show you that again. I'm going to take my yarn behind my hook, wrap it over the hook, and then wrap it back behind the hook again, making a little crisscross so that the cut end of my yarn goes over like this. You see that little crisscross? Okay, now I'm just going to kind of hold on to that, to the cut end, and I'm going to take the end that's still attached to my ball, wrap it around my hook from back to front, wrap it around my hook from back to front, grab the crossover and pull this through. And I've created a slip knot. Let me zoom in and do that again. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So, take the cut end of my yarn, wrap it over the hook and back around so that the cut end goes over top. Cut end. Okay. Now I'm going to take the end that's still attached to the ball, wrap it behind and over my hook. I'm going to pinch the crossover, and I'm going to use the hook part of my hook to grab that loop I made and pull it through. When I'm pulling through, I do not want my hook facing up or to the side or to the back. See, if I face it to the back, it falls out. I want the hook facing down at the crossover, because that's where I have, it's almost like the neck of this loop, that's where I have the most space to pull through, and the hook isn't going to catch on to anything it shouldn't catch on to. So let me show you that one more time, and then if you need to see it again, you can just hit rewind. I'm going to take my yarn, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I think I'm a little bit too close here, can't quite get enough on screen. Okay. Take my yarn behind my hook, wrap it over and back to behind my hook again. I'm then going to take the yarn that's still attached to the ball, wrap it behind the hook and over front, pinch the crossover and pull that yarn that I wrapped over through the hole. And that has made my slip knot. What you have also done is you've also at this point learned to make a chain. But now we're going to talk about holding the yarn correctly, or a way that I like to hold the yarn, and making a long chain. So what I like to do is I actually wrap the yarn under my pinky, over my ring finger, under my middle finger, over my pointer or index finger. This is how I like to hold the yarn. If I need even more tension, I wrap it around my hand once and then do the wrap over and under all the fingers. For now, I'm just going to show you under the pinky, over the ring finger, under the middle finger, over the pointer finger. Now, to start your chain, you're going to pinch the slip knot between your middle finger and your thumb. Wrap the yarn from the back to the front. Some people wrap the yarn, some people kind of wrap the hook. I tend to actually wrap the hook. But the yarn, it's called a yarn over, and it starts in the back and goes to the front. And again, you want to make sure when you pull this through that the hook part of your hook is pointing towards the neck or the knot of this stitch. This loop on your hook is kind of in a teardrop shape. You see that? You want your hook to be pointing towards the point of the teardrop. And you're just going to pull it through. Again, wrap the yarn from back to front around the hook. Make sure the hook is pointing towards the pointed end of your loop and pull it through. And just keep on going. This is a chain stitch. Now eventually you're going to get kind of far away from where you're pinching, and it's going to be harder to keep control of your work. So you have to move up. This is something where I see a lot of new people getting confused. They wonder why they don't have control of their work. It's because they're not holding it. Especially when you just have a chain, you don't have a lot of weight to your work yet. You have to keep pinching. All right, wrap the yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through. It's getting far away. Pinch. And you just keep going, and eventually you can get really quick with this. No matter how quick you are, you still have to keep on moving your fingers up every once in a while. Okay? Now, you see, all you have to do is pull and it comes out. So let's talk about if you want to end your chain. If you decide you want to make something with your chain, right? So let's say I've made this little chain and I want, that's what I want right there. I just want that much of a chain. What you're going to do is clip your end, whoop, and then pull that loop. Okay, let me show you what I did. Okay, this is your chain, right? All you have to do once you've clipped your yarn is pull that end through. And now it does not come apart when you pull on it. One last thing I want to go over before you move on to your next lesson is the parts of a chain, and this will probably be in your next lesson as well. You see this? This is considered the front or the top of your chain. And you see how it's a bunch of drops all coming out of one another? Again, it's teardrop shape. Here's the pointy end, wraps around back to the pointy end. So there's a bubbly end on this end and a pointy end on this end, and they all come out of each other. If you turn it over to what's considered the bottom or the bottom of your work, it's got all of these little ridges. Okay, so you can actually see that there are 3 different parts almost of this, 3 different loops on this chain. This part right here, all of these little ridges are called your front loops. All of these little ridges are called your front loops. All of these little ridges back here are called your back loops. And when you turn it over, these ridges along the bottom are called your bottom loops. Okay? Various patterns will have you work into various parts of the chain stitch, but in most cases they will call this the bottom loop or the bottom ridge. They will call these loops right here the front loops, and they will call these loops back here the back loops. Okay? So I hope that has helped you understand just your basics of getting started with crochet, how to hold your yarn, your hook, how to make a slip knot, how to make a chain stitch. And there is a lot more information for you here on the Stitchopedia, which is ever growing. So please enjoy.